Hi everybody, it's Mr. Nathan from the Literacy Lab. Today we're going to read about the Civil Rights Movement. Chapter 1, Little Rock 9. In September 1957, 9 black students started at a school in Little Rock, Arkansas. Before, only white students went there. White people harassed the black students. They became known as the Little Rock 9. Arkansas's governor sent soldiers. They kept the black students out. President Dwight D. Eisenhower responded. How? He sent soldiers too. These soldiers kept the Little Rock 9 safe. They walked them to school. The Little Rock 9 were part of the Civil Rights Movement. This movement took place in the 1950s and 1960s. Black people fought for equal rights. They wanted to end centuries of oppression. U.S. slavery ended with the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. But laws were still unfair. They made voting hard for black people. Many places were segregated. Here's a picture of segregated water fountains. Chapter 2, Many Protests. The Supreme Court ruled segregation illegal in 1954, but many places did not follow the law. Black activists led protests starting in 1955. Rosa Parks was one. She refused to give her bus seat to a white man. This picture is labeled to show you her name, Rosa Parks. Parks was arrested. After this, around 40,000 black people stopped riding buses. Many walked instead. As a result, a court said buses must integrate. Others led sit-ins at segregated places. Many were at restaurant lunch counters. Protesters sat. They wouldn't leave. These sit-ins began in Greensboro, North Carolina. But they spread. Lunch counters began serving black people. What do you think? How would you feel to not be allowed somewhere? Would you protest? Why or why not? Here's a picture of a lunch counter sit-in. Malcolm X was a black leader. He spoke about black pride. He thought black people should defend themselves against violence. His ideas helped form the Black Panther Party. Members of this party kept black neighborhoods safe. They gave food. They gave clothes too. Here's a picture of Black Panther Party members and Malcolm X. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led many protests. One was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was on August 28, 1963. About 250,000 people marched. Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. He spoke of his hopes. He wanted equal rights. He inspired many. What do you think? Dr. King was later killed for his beliefs. Before his death, he faced threats. He was arrested 29 times during protests. He kept protesting. Why do you think he did this? Here's a picture of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is labeled. On March 7, 1965, black people marched in Alabama. Why? Black people were stopped from voting there. John Lewis was one leader. Hosea Williams was another. Marchers were hurt. People saw on TV. This led to more marches. Hosea Williams and John Lewis are labeled in the picture. Here we have a map. Take a look. Dr. King led another march in Alabama. It was more than 50 miles or 80 kilometers long. It took 5 days. Marchers had to stop and camp. See their route. So here's a big map of Alabama. We have an inset that shows what part of Alabama they marched across. Chapter 3, Laws Change. The Alabama marches brought change. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed a law. The Voting Rights Act made voting easier for black people. Here a ballot is labeled in the picture. Protests changed many laws. Like what? Segregation ended. Voting got easier. It became illegal to stop black people from living where they wanted. Thousands of activists fought for equal rights. They faced violence. They fought anyway. The civil rights movement helped black people, but they still faced prejudice. Many still fight for equal rights. Do you know of anyone who fights for equality? What do you think? People protest about issues they care about. What do you care about? How could you help make a change? Quick facts and tools. Here's a timeline of some events from the Civil Rights Movement. And we have a glossary that has words that were bolded in the story that will help us learn about them if we don't know about them. So let's read through. Activists. People who use actions such as protesting to support or oppose one side of an issue. Arrested. Stopped and held by the power of the law. Civil rights means the individual rights that all members of a democratic society have to freedom and equal treatment under law. Harassed. Created an unpleasant or unsafe situation, usually with unkind words and actions. Inspired. Influenced or encouraged someone. Integrate. To end segregation and allow use by all races. Oppression. Unjust or cruel use of authority or power. Prejudice is an opinion that is formed about a person or a group of people before getting to know them. Protests, demonstrations against something. Segregated, separated or kept apart, particularly with regards to race. Segregated is the opposite of integrated. Sit-ins, protests during which activists occupied seats or space at racially segregated establishments. Slavery was a system in which people are owned by other people and are forced to work without pay. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. And voting is casting a ballot or making a choice in an election. We also have the index, which shows us some page numbers if we wanted to learn more about certain people or ideas. If I wanted to learn more about Rosa Parks, I go to pages 8 and 9. Or maybe I want to learn more about equal rights. See on pages 6, 14, and 20. Thanks for reading with me today about the Civil Rights Movement. See you next time.